with the help of friends and neighbors.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. Thousands of pro-democracy activists chanted for reform on Friday as they staged a sit-in at Hong Kong airport, hoping to win international support for their movement after 2 months of protests. Take a look. Activists, some dressed in the movement's signature black, sat on the floor in the airport's arrivals hall and held up signs in Chinese and English condemning police violence. They cheered loudly as activists overcame objections from airport staff and hung a long banner from the railings of the upper floor reading "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution Now." The protests that began 2 months ago over a controversial bill to allow extradition to mainland China have now morphed into a broader movement demanding democratic reforms. Protesters want to see the controversial extradition bill, which has been suspended, completely withdrawn, and are also seeking direct election of the city's leader and an investigation into alleged police brutality. The airport sit-ins have not been authorized, but a previous demonstration at the transport hub passed off peacefully without disrupting flights. Further protests are planned across Hong Kong over the weekend, with fears that new confrontations between police and demonstrators are possible. Hundreds of people have been arrested in the unrest that has gripped the city since the protests began. And with little sign that authorities plan to meet protesters' demands, the crisis is expected to continue. Meanwhile, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said the government should not make concessions to the protests, as she suggests the recent unrest hurts the economy.
I don't think we should just sort of make concessions in order to silence the violent protesters. We should do what is right for Hong Kong. And at this moment, what is right for Hong Kong, as we have heard all our 33 business representatives told us, is to stop the violence and to say no to the chaotic situation that Hong Kong has experienced in the last few weeks, so that we can move on. And when we move on, we will hope that we could tackle the more fundamental and deep-seated problems that may have surfaced as a result of this particular situation.
China demanded Thursday that U.S. diplomats based in Hong Kong stop interfering in the city's affairs after reports that they met with pro-democracy activists, prompting a furious response from Washington. China's foreign ministry had expressed strong dissatisfaction with U.S. authorities, citing local media reports that a U.S. official from Hong Kong's U.S. Consulate General had met with a local independence group. Hong Kong newspaper Ta Kung Pao published a photograph of a U.S. diplomat who it identified as Julie Yede of the consulate's political section, talking to student leaders, including Joshua Wong, in the lobby of a luxury hotel. The photograph appeared under the headline "Foreign Forces Intervene." Beijing have blamed Hong Kong's unrest on black hands from the U.S.
I don't think that leaking an American diplomat's private information, pictures, names of their children, I don't think that that's a formal protest. That is what a thuggish regime would do. That's not how a responsible nation would behave. Releasing any of that personal information of an American diplomat is completely unacceptable. That's not a protest. That's what a thuggish regime does, and it's unacceptable.
Meanwhile, Typhoon Hanna has slightly weakened and now outside the Philippine area of responsibility, but heavy rains will continue today. In its severe weather bulletin, the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services, or PAGASA, said Hanna exited at 12:30 a.m. Friday. Hanna, with international name Lekima, continued to enhance the southwest monsoon or habagat, even after exiting the PAR yesterday. Meanwhile, another typhoon with international name Crossa was estimated at 1,990 kilometers east of extreme northern Luzon, with maximum sustained winds of 155 kilometers per hour near the center and gustiness of up to 190 kilometers per hour and slowly moving east. It is not expected to enter the PAR. The southwest monsoon or the habagat will continue to bring moderate to heavy rains over Ilocos region, Cordillera Administrative Region, Batanes, Babuyan Group of Islands, Zambales, Bataan, Occidental Mindoro, and northern portions of Palawan, including Calamian Islands. Light to moderate with intermittent heavy monsoon rains will prevail over Metro Manila, Western Visayas, and the rest of Calabarzon, Central Luzon, and Mimaropa.
China issued a red alert for incoming super typhoon Lekima, which is expected to batter eastern Zhejiang province early Saturday with high winds and torrential rainfall. The 9th typhoon of the year is projected to move northwest up China's coast, with the China Meteorological Administration focusing its attention on Shanghai and Zhejiang, Fujian, Jiangsu, and Shandong provinces. Lekima Center was about 290 kilometers southeast of the city of Wenling in Zhejiang Friday morning, with winds reaching 209 kilometers per hour, official news agency Xinhua reported. Authorities were preemptively canceling Saturday train services in Zhejiang, Shanghai, and elsewhere, according to the CMA's newspaper. They also issued a yellow alert for torrential rain and flooding for provinces in Lekima's path. The storm was sweeping past the northern tip of Taiwan on Friday, where 9 people were injured, some trees were downed, and some 73,000 homes lost power temporarily. Taiwan authorities also said about 518 flights were canceled Friday due to heavy rains. Rail services were also suspended in some places on the island, but were expected to resume later Friday. Some airlines have canceled Saturday flights out of Shanghai as a precaution, said the CMA.
Meanwhile, Typhoon Lekima hit Ishigaki Island in western Japan on Thursday. China's eastern coast is on the alert for the typhoon, which is due to make landfall there on Saturday, meanwhile. Now, forecasters warned of mudslides, flooding, high waves, and powerful winds as this year's 9th typhoon edged closer to the Japanese islands. A total of 83 flights, 148 ferry services had already been canceled in the region, according to the Okinawa Times newspaper. Now, the agency said as of 4 p.m. yesterday, the eye of the storm was about 150 kilometers east-southeast of Ishigaki Island, traveling north-northwest at 20 kilometers per hour, with maximum sustained winds of 180 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 256 kilometers per hour. Lekima is also due to buffet Taiwan with powerful winds and heavy rains overnight and today.
The government said 57 people died due to heat-related medical issues in Japan over the week starting July 29, with the number of those taken to hospitals more than tripling to 18,347 from the previous week's 5,664. Tokyo had the most people taken to hospitals at 1,857, followed by 1,342 in Aichi Prefecture and 1,307 in Saitama Prefecture. Deaths were reported across 24 prefectures, with Hokkaido seeing the most at 7, followed by 5 each in Ibaraki and Saitama. Japan's Fire and Disaster Management Agency said that atmospheric high pressure led to the lengthy hot period. Temperatures climbed to 35 degrees Celsius, that's 95 degrees Fahrenheit, in Tokyo in the last week. On Wednesday, temperatures reached 38.4 Celsius In Kumagaya, a city northwest of Tokyo, and 36.9 degrees Celsius in Fukushima and Osaka, according to Japan's public broadcaster NHK. It is advising people to constantly stay hydrated and rest in cooler areas.
Floods that have killed at least 30 people forced the closure of Kochi International Airport Friday as the South Indian state of Kerala confronted a second straight year of crisis-level downpours. Take a look. With predictions of freak rains continuing for several days, Kerala's Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan warned the public that dam gates may have to be opened soon. More than 20 landslides had already been reported and high-level alerts ordered in 9 districts, he said, adding that several people were feared trapped under the mud. More than 100,000 have been displaced. Nearly 500 people died in the 2018 floods, believed to be the worst in a century. Now, experts blame the rising waters on deforestation and the state's rapid recent urbanization, as well as poor management of the many dams.
Raging floods across Myanmar have forced tens of thousands of people from their homes in recent weeks as monsoon rains pummel the nation. Watch this.
The unprecedented impact of climate change is increasingly putting the world's food security at risk. A new UN study revealed on Thursday. Take a look. The special report on climate change and land from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned that more than 500 million people are living in areas affected by desertification and are being negatively affected by the climate crisis. Speaking at the launch of a special report into the climate change and land by the UN Intergovernmental Panel, in Geneva, experts highlighted how the rise in global temperatures linked to increasing pressures on fertile soil risks jeopardizing food security for the planet. Humans affect more than 70% of ice-free land, and a quarter is already degraded, noted Valerie Masson Delmont, co-chair of the 3 working groups that contributed to the bumper 1,200-page report. The highest numbers of people affected are in South and East Asia, the Sahel region, including North Africa, in addition to the Middle East, including the Arabian Peninsula.
Today, 500 million people live in areas that experience desertification. People living in already degraded or desertified areas are increasingly negatively affected by climate change.
Agricultural practices can help build up carbon in soils, but it could also mean using more bioenergy, with or without carbon capture and storage, and expanding forests. 25 to 30% of food produced is lost or wasted, and reducing food loss and waste can reduce pressure on land, improve food security, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
We humans affect more than 70% of ice-free land. A quarter of this land is degraded. The way we produce food and what we eat contributes to the loss of natural ecosystems and declining biodiversity. When land is degraded, it reduces the soil's ability to take up carbon, and this exacerbates climate change.
Adaptation and mitigation have to go together. There is no possibility for anybody to say, oh, climate change is happening and then we just adapt to it. The capacity to adapt is limited. And it certainly depends on the process, it depends on the region and so forth, and there are some regions and some places, especially in the low latitudes, where vulnerability is extreme. And even in those countries, when there is an emphasis on adaptation in their development strategies, mitigation should play a key role.
Produced by 107 scientists from more than 50 countries across all regions of the world, with more than half of the contributing authors from developing nations, the IPCC report provides a peer-based review of the latest research on land use today. According to the IPCC, agriculture, forestry, and other land use contribute to around a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, a fact that policymakers should consider when considering where to invest to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change.
We see increasing pressures of land degradation, desertification in places like Africa, Asia, and South America. And so the sharing of technologies in that regard was important. The importance of government support was also called out. So it's not only about a cooperation between the North and the South, but also about governments supporting local land managers to improve the way they manage land and make that more sustainable. An important element within that discussion was the ability for smallholders to access credit. So the importance of accessing financial resources to be able to change the way you manage the land is important.
Amid a wealth of climate data and research and possible solutions, the expert panel noted that policy making had been identified as the key bottleneck in tackling problems. To overcome this, countries should consider improving how they assess emissions, suggested Jim Skea, co-chair of the Working Group 3.
One of the problems is how we actually measure and estimate emissions from the farming sector. And it's easy for energy. You take the tons of coal and multiply it by a number or whatever. Land is much more complex. And at the moment, we don't have inventories that really truly reflect in many countries the kind of diet that livestock use, the type of production systems that are in place, which your question really highlights. And I think the big challenge, if we're moving forward in the policy world, is to do it on a better evidence base so that farmers are better informed and incentivised about the kind of production systems that they actually use.
Climate change is expected to lead to an increase in work-related heat stress, damaging productivity and causing job and economic losses, with the poorest countries suffering the worst impacts, according to a report released by the International Labour Organization, or ILO. The International Labour Organization estimates global economic losses from the impact of climate change on worker productivity to reach $2,400 billion by 2030, with the Philippines counted among the most heavily affected.
Heat stress is one of the main climatic drivers of migration, as people move to minimize the effect of rising temperatures on their health and also try to compensate for the income loss due to reduced labor productivity.
In its working on a warmer planet, the impact of heat stress on labor productivity and decent work report, ILO said almost 80 million full-time jobs will be lost due to global warming. The Philippines is among the countries which will be heavily affected by the warmer climate. The labor arm of the United Nations said work hours lost to heat stress in the Philippines in 1995 for agriculture was at 3.20%. For the construction sector, this was 3.20%. By 2030, ILO said this work loss of heat stress for both categories is expected to soar to 6.50%.
Heat stress refers to a situation where it is too hot to work, or at least too hot to work at normal intensity. So it affects workers' safety and health, it affects the economy, and it affects productivity as well. our report shows that 80 million jobs will be lost in 2030 because of heat stress. We also found that two sub-regions will be particularly affected, and that's South Asia and Western Africa, where the losses will represent 5% of working hours in 2030. Economic costs are huge. They represent 2,400 billion of GDP loss in 2030. That's equivalent to about the size of the United Kingdom economy. Now, there are, of course, human costs in addition.
To minimize the impact of global warming on workers, ILO urged the tripartite approach to design, finance, and implement national policies to address heat stress risks and protect workers. These include adequate infrastructure and improved early warning systems for heat events, and improved implementation of international labor standards, such as in the area of occupational safety and health, to help design policies to tackle heat-related hazards. This came as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the latest data from the World Meteorological Organization shows that the month of July at least equaled, if not surpassed, the hottest month in recorded history, and it followed the hottest June ever.
We have always lived through hot summers, but this is not the summer of our youth. This is not your grandfather's summer. According to the very latest data from the World Meteorological Organization and its Climate Center, the month of July at least equaled, if not surpassed, the hottest month in recorded history. And this follows the hottest June ever. This is even more significant because the previous hottest month, July 2016, occurred during one of the strongest El Niños ever. That is not the case this year. All of this means we are on track for the period from 2015 to 2019 to be the 5 hottest years on record. The world's leading scientists tell us that we must limit temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius if we are to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. We need to cut greenhouse emissions by 45% by 2030, and we need carbon neutrality by 2050. And we need to mainstream climate change risks across all decisions to drive resilient growth, reduce vulnerability, and avoid investments that could cause greater damage. We need rapid and deep change in how we do business, generate power, build cities, and feed the world. And having endured what is possibly the hottest month in recorded history, we need action now.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced new sanctions against Iran's foreign minister.
To other news now, raids by immigration authorities that swept up 680 migrants in the southern United States of Mississippi left their children to fend for themselves with the help of friends and neighbors. Take a look. The raids, which targeted 7 food processing plants in 6 Mississippi cities on Wednesday, were believed to be the largest in a single state in U.S. history. The migrants were bussed to detention centers for processing and possible deportation, but children in Forest, Mississippi discovered their parents gone only after coming home from school. Now in tearful scenes captured by a local television station, children wept and begged on camera for their parents' release.
My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal or something. That's what the immigrants took them. Please let him free. The governments, please put your heart. Let my parents be free with everybody else, please. Don't leave the child with cryness and everything.
Going through today?
Most of these kids, they only have like one parent. And like the children I brought today, their mother is gone and they don't know where she's at.
Friends and neighbors took charge of the children and brought them to the Clear Creek boot camp where they spent the night. Community groups donated food and bedding. Videos and pictures showed children crying, covering their faces, consoling each other, and seated on the floor eating pizza from napkins. The WJTV said all the children had returned home or to the homes of relatives by Thursday. At a news conference, officials said the raids were months in the planning.
Today, as a result of the hard work of these men and women in law enforcement, we have set another record. This time in what is believed to be the largest single state immigration enforcement operation in our nation's history. Right now, these individuals who were detained are being processed, and based upon that process, based upon their criminal history, based upon their status in our thresholds in our office, we will determine at a later date who we prosecute criminally.
Nothing. He's not a criminal.
Mexico said 107 of its nationals were among the 680 detained. The operation was the culmination of a year-long investigation, and it unfolded just hours before President Trump, who has made illegal immigration a trademark issue and who recently vowed to deport millions of undocumented immigrants, arrived in El Paso, a majority Latino city on the Mexico border, where 22 people were killed over the weekend in an attack that federal authorities are investigating as an act of domestic terrorism. The raids were by far the largest to occur since Mr. Trump took office, and the biggest since December 2006, when more than 1,200 people were swept up in a raid at several units of a meat processing company.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says his powder keg move to strip the disputed Kashmir region of its autonomy is necessary to stop terrorism and separatism as he addresses the nation via his YouTube account. He defended his highly controversial decision to remove the special status according to Kashmir.
साथियों, मुझे पूरा विश्वास है इस नई व्यवस्था के तहत हम सब मिलकर आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद से जम्मू कश्मीर को मुक्त कराएंगे.
Modi accused Pakistan of using the special status as a weapon against the country to inflame the passions of some people against India. Modi said the special status had not given anything other than terrorism, separatism, nepotism, and big corruption. But with Kashmir now fully part of the Indian Union, the region would enjoy more jobs, corruption, and red tape, he said, adding that key infrastructure projects would be expedited. The area has been in lockdown since Sunday night, with mobile landline and internet networks cut off. Pakistan says the removal of special status breaches international law. Like India, Pakistan claims Kashmir in its entirety, and the two nuclear-armed powers have fought several wars over the Himalayan region since partition in 1947. Each controls part of the territory. Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi ruled out a new military conflict on Thursday, telling reporters in the capital Islamabad we're not looking at the military option. We're not. The contesting claims over Kashmir have led to two of the three wars between the neighbors.
The Philippine government on Friday urged Filipinos abroad to remain cautious and to observe health safety precautions amid the outbreak of the Ebola virus disease in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The advisory was released by the Department of Foreign Affairs following the declaration of EVD as a public health emergency of international concern by the World Health Organization. The DFA, together with the Philippine Embassy in Nairobi, which has jurisdiction over the DRC, is closely monitoring the health concern in the African state. The relevant Philippine government agencies, such as the Department of Health and its Bureau of Quarantine, the Bureau of Immigration, the Civil Aeronautics Board, and the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration remain vigilant in monitoring developments on the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa, it said. Earlier, the WHO recommended the implementation of heightened health measures in the DRC, which remains the only affected country in the region.
The voice recording of Nora Koirin's mom will be played over loudspeakers in a bid to find the missing British teenager. The 15-year-old disappeared from a resort in Malaysia on Sunday, and more than 200 people have been involved in the rescue operation, working on shifts through the night as well as a helicopter search.
Kita dah buat dah rakaman suara oleh ahli keluarga, dan kita akan masa buat pencarian tu kita akan mainkan rakaman itu seolah-olah ibu dia ataupun keluarga dia memanggil dia lah.
The 15-year-old disappeared from her room the day after checking into the resort with her London-based family. They believed she was abducted, but police have classified it as a missing person case. A helicopter with thermal imaging equipment is being deployed, joining the 267 people, divers, drones, and sniffer dogs already involved in the search. The daughter of the Franco-Irish couple went missing from the 12-acre Dusun Airport Dusun Airport or Dusun Resort, about an hour outside Kuala Lumpur and in the foothills of the mountain range and next to a forest reserve. Her family say Nora is a child with special needs and has learning and developmental disabilities which make her especially vulnerable. He said Nora would not know how to get help and would never leave her family voluntarily. Meanwhile, police have analyzed fingerprints found in the resort cottage from which Nora was reported missing. Deputy Police Chief Che Zakaria Othman said the prints were at an open window in a downstairs hall, not in the bedroom upstairs where Nora was sleeping with her siblings. Investigations are still ongoing to identify who the fingerprints belong to.
President Duterte said he was open to lifting his government's blanket ban on the Dengvaxia vaccine. Manila prohibited the import, sale, and distribution of the drug manufactured by French pharmaceutical firm Sanofi after parents blamed it for the deaths of several dozen children who were among more than 700,000 people immunized in a state-run trial program. Now, President Duterte, however, said that he remains in a quandary whether or not to lift the ban on the use of Dengvaxia. Let's listen in.
I may quandary whether to allow Dengvaxia or not. I'd rather go on the side of science. If nobody would believe me, still I would say that if there's anything there in the Western medicine and even itong mga herbal ng Oriental, if it would mean saving people's lives, I'll go for it.
You want to use Dengvaxia again?
Walang nakikita ko may epidemic eh. So, yung gustong magpabakuna, kasi ang anak ko dumaan ng vaccine eh. She had the vaccination.
Is that a yes? Is that a yes?
Hindi ko nga pamalaman. I have to hear mga,
But are you open, sir?
Yes, I am open to the use of Dengvaxia again. Maraming patay na. It's an epidemic. Now, compare it with vis-a-vis with those who died. I want to hear the words of the experts, doctors. And we have enough bright people here to tell us. I do not need foreigners to telling me. My own Filipino scientists and doctors would tell me what to do. I will be guided by their announcements.
Philippines in 2016 became the first nation to use Dengvaxia in a mass immunization program. In 2017, the government stopped its dengue immunization program using Dengvaxia after Sanofi came out with advisory which said patients who had no prior exposure to dengue virus could suffer severe symptoms if vaccinated with Dengvaxia. And the news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back.
Health is our most important asset.
Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Malaysia filed criminal charges Friday against 17 current and former executives of 3 Goldman Sachs subsidiaries, piling further pressure on the Wall Street titan over the multi-billion-dollar 1MDB scandal. They included Richard Gnod, Chief Executive of Goldman Sachs International, and Michael Evans, former Chief of Goldman's Asia operations, who is now President of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba. Huge sums were looted from Malaysian sovereign wealth fund, One Malaysia Development Berhad, in a globe-spanning fraud which allegedly involved ex-Prime Minister Najib Razak and his inner circle. Goldman's role has been under scrutiny as it helped arrange bond issues worth $6.5 billion for 1MDB. Malaysia claims large amounts were misappropriated in the process and is seeking hefty compensation from the bank. Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad reopened investigations into the 1MDB affair last year after defeating Najib at the polls, in large part due to public anger at the scandal, and pressure has been steadily mounting on the bank since.
In the meantime, finance engaged US attorney.
Chinese factory price inflation fell below zero for the first time in 3 years, according to official data on Friday, the latest sign of weakening demand amid mounting trade tensions with the U.S. The Producer Price Index, or PPI, an important barometer of the industrial sector that measures the cost of goods at the factory gate, dropped 0.3% year-on-year in July, down from 0% in June, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. A slowdown in factory gate inflation reflects sluggish demand, while a turn to deflation could dent corporate profits and drag on the world's #2 economy, which in turn could lead to a drop in prices globally. The reading marks the first deflation since August of 2016 and fell short of the 0.1% forecast in a Bloomberg News survey.
China's July food prices jumped 9.1% from a year ago, Data from the National Bureau of Statistics showed as the country battles soaring pork prices amid the spread of African swine fever. In particular, pork prices rose 27% from a year ago in July, while fresh fruit prices rose 39.1%, the data showed. The July figures follow an 8.3% year-on-year jump in June. Non-food items in July were 1.3% higher, government data showed. Meanwhile, Chinese fruit supply has been hurt by severe weather that hurt crop production this year, sending prices of apples up sharply. China is the world's largest producer and a major consumer of the staple fruit.
Meanwhile, Japan's economy grew at a faster than expected clip in the second quarter, according to official data on Friday, helped by celebrations to usher in a new imperial era. Gross domestic product in the world's third biggest economy grew 0.4% from the previous quarter, according to the Cabinet Office, beating analysts' median forecast of 0.1%. The third straight period of expansion will also bolster Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's determination to push through a controversial sales tax hike in October, despite warnings it could weigh on growth. Shoppers are rushing to make purchases before the rate rises from 8% to 10% on October 1, and this boost for consumption also helped push GDP higher, according to economists. An unprecedented 10-day holiday for the enthronement of Emperor Naruhito, which kicked off a new imperial era in Japan, also pepped up the figures, according to analysts. However, trade frictions between the U.S. and China weighed on exports and corporate spending in some sectors, such as machinery, according to Yuichiro Nagai, senior economist at Mizuho Securities.
Chinese telecom giant Huawei unveils its own operating system as it faces the threat of losing access to Android systems amid escalating U.S.-China trade tensions.
我们希望应用开发、一次性开发多种形态的终端能够统一部署，能够直接。同时，我们希望操作系统能让终端的运行App 的运行更加流畅、更加安全。我们如何能打造面向未来的 OS？ 今天我们带来了华为的鸿蒙 OS、Harmony OS
Huawei said the first version of the operating system would launch later this year in its smart screen products before expanding across a range of smart devices, including wearable technology, over the next 3 years. Huawei, considered the world leader in super-fast 5th generation or 5G equipment and the world's #2 smartphone producer, has been blacklisted by President Trump amid suspicions it provides a backdoor for Chinese intelligence services, something the firm denies. On Thursday, Beijing slammed U.S. rules banning Huawei and other Chinese companies from government contracts, saying they amounted to an abuse of state power. As a result of U.S. moves to blacklist Huawei, American companies are theoretically no longer allowed to sell technology products to the firm, but a 3-month exemption period, which ends next week, was granted by Washington before the measure came into force. That ban could prevent the Chinese tech firm from getting hold of key hardware and software, including smartphone chips and elements of the Google Android operating system, which equips the vast majority of smartphones in the world, including those of Huawei. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Tungkulin ang MT.
ASEAN in Focus. Monday to Friday, 2 to 2:30 p.m.
All right, here's Ben Bernaldez for Sports News.
Prosecutors in Brazil said Thursday they agree with the police finding that there is not enough evidence to prove rape allegations against Neymar and have asked a judge to close the case. Neymar has denied the allegations and he raped a Brazilian woman in a Paris hotel in May. The ugly affair dominated headlines and conversations in the soccer-mad country for weeks. The scandal blew up on June 2 when Neymar published a 7-minute video on Instagram where he had first been in contact with Anagela Trindade, revealing that he had been accused of rape. In an attempt to defend himself against allegations, Neymar's video was accompanied by WhatsApp messages and images of his encounter with Trindade. In tennis, Spanish top seed Rafael Nadal defeated Guido Pella 6-3, 6-4 on Thursday to reach a second straight quarterfinal at the ATP Montreal Masters. The Spaniard improved to 36-8 in Canada as he seeks his 5th title at the event. Nadal will be competing in his 9th quarterfinal in Canada after advancing on his 4th match point. Argentina's Pella saved 3 Nadal match winners in the penultimate game. In Philippine sports, 2 months after taking to social media to solicit financial support for her Olympic bid, Filipino weightlifting star Heidelin Diaz received on Thursday a 2 million peso sponsorship to boost her preparation for the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games. This after Senator Christopher Bongo initiated a project that resulted in the signing of Memorandum of Agreement between the Philippine Sports Commission and Phoenix Petroleum Philippines to support Diaz's Olympic bid. PSC Chairman William Butch Ramirez and Phoenix Vice President Raymond Zurilla signed the agreement in front of Diaz and other government officials in Malacanang Palace on Thursday afternoon. Ramirez said Diaz, a silver medalist in the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics, will be getting an initial package amounting to 2 million pesos. He said Diaz is also receiving 48,000 a month allowance, housing and food, coach and foreign training allowance. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez and I'm 1 with 25.
Olympic gold medalist and world figure skating champion Patrick Chan talks with ABC's Kathleen Cruz about Stars on Ice, a theatrical show featuring Canadian Olympic medalists and elite figure skaters and champions performing together in a show.
Jumps, spins, lifts, and glides on ice are just some of the moves of a professional figure skater. Figure skating has become one of the most popular and oldest sport in the Olympic Winter Games. This time, however, it's not the Olympic Games but the Stars on Ice, a theatrical show featuring Canadian Olympic medalists and elite figure skaters and champions performing together and skate in exhibitions all in one show.
Yeah, so Stars on Ice has been around for many, many years, only over 30 years. It was started by Scott Hamilton, who is an Olympic champion and world champion for the United States. It's been kind of the staple for skaters who are just coming off, either still currently competing or have just retired like myself. It's kind of the cream of the crop when it comes to competitive skaters, watching them on the professional side on a more show exhibition type environment. So it's a little more of an interactive experience for the audience.
This year's Stars on Ice includes professional figure skaters, most of whom were 2018 Olympic medalists, including Canadian legend, Olympic gold and silver medalist, 3-time world champion, and 10-time Canadian champion Patrick Chan, Olympic gold, silver, and bronze medalist Caitlin Osmond, Olympic medalist pair Megan Dahamel and Eric Radford, 2-time Olympic silver medalist Elvis Stochko. Also featured in the show are world silver medalist Canadian duo Caitlin Weaver and Andrew Poco, world champion Kurt Browning and Canadian champion Nam Nguyen.
We have a lot of great songs. We have group numbers and then our individual numbers. That's kind of unique to Stars on Ice. It's an opportunity for us to skate to music we wouldn't typically skate to, let's say, for example, in a competitive environment. But now you have the opportunity to really grow yourself by picking different types of style and music.
The show delivers the same level of excitement and artistry to the audience. But for a professional figure skater like Patrick Chan, who has been skating from when he was young, here's what he says about skating in exhibitions versus competitions.
The main difference between doing Stars on Ice or any professional show compared to competing is your level of expectation is a lot more reasonable. You don't have as much pressure. You don't have judges sitting on one side of the arena judging you and your performance. No one is checking off jumps that you're missing or that you're landing properly. So there's a lot more liberty, and you can actually spend the time to connect with the audience. You get to have a moment with them, which you typically wouldn't have in competition.
The Stars on Ice in Canada offers Canadians a rare opportunity to witness live figure skating and watch professional figure skaters, which is only normally seen during competitions and championships. Reporting from Rogers Arena here in Vancouver, Kathleen Cruz, 1 with 25.
And Hello Kitty is saying hello to the Las Vegas Strip. A Hello Kitty Cafe just opened up there. Here's our EBC correspondent and a Sanrio fan herself, Casey Carrasco.
Hey everyone, guess where I'm at? If you haven't looked behind me yet, I am at the just opened Hello Kitty Cafe in Las Vegas, Nevada. Come on and let's go check it out. Hello Kitty has its friends. We have Choco Cat, My Melody, Karopi, and actually today's his birthday, July 10th, just in case you didn't know. Also, if you don't know much about Hello Kitty, which I'm surprised if you don't, they do have some information right there, right before you go and try their tasty treats. I think I'm going to try out this beautifully decorated donut here. This is definitely a sweet treat. Really, really good. In honor of Karopi's birthday, I'm gonna eat them. It smells minty, so I'm assuming it's like a mint filling. Ooh, it is. Now, every single time I see Karopi, I'm gonna think of a mint taste. But definitely good. If you're a chocolate mint lover, you'll definitely like this one. So I got another little sweet treat here. It's kind of nice. It's wrapped up in a present. Ooh! And it's a present and a present. It's sweet, but not so sweet to a point where it's going to give you cavity sweet, but it's just right.
I grew up with this. I used to collect like the erasers, Choco and Karopi. This is a worldwide brand that I've been a fan of since a kid. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love Las Vegas is like a second home. You know, even though I live in California, I've been out here 5-10 times a year since I can remember, and this is like the closest to home. And I love this area. Being on the Strip is like a dream come true. I just want to bring an edgier side of Hello Kitty out there and show people like I can do cool stuff with it, the food game, and help elevate the brand. On the Hello Kitty Cafe, I like the Karopi pistachio donut. Like, it's a pistachio cream filled, and that thing is fire. Yeah.
So other than the sweet treats that Hello Kitty Cafe does offer, they also do have merchandise for all you Hello Kitty collectors like myself. They have the nice little plush, very, very soft, to pillows that you can have in the car for when you're driving. And they have the t-shirts that are custom to the Las Vegas area, so you can only get it here. So if you collect them, come out here to Las Vegas and you'll be able to get them. So that's a wrap. Thank you for joining me on this special feature on the Hello Kitty Cafe in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you can't tell already, my favorite is Hello Kitty. What's your favorite Sanrio character? Make sure to like and subscribe to EBC Digital Nest. My name is Casey Carrasco, and I am 1 with 25.
Thank you, Casey Lee.
Thank you, Casey Lee. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and we're one with 25.